find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance on
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. And Judy, tell folks the title of today's episode.
Men's Emotional Leadership Development, an interview with Owen Marcus.
And we just finished that interview. Owen developed, it's called MELD for the MELD, Men's Emotional Leadership Development. And he talks about the ways that he has, for many years, it sounds like, worked with men and helped men learn how to open up and get in touch with who we are and our emotions, and especially be able to relate to women better. And it sounds really interesting. So check out that interview.
Yes, please do.
So, Judy, guess what I want to talk about before we get there?
Well, let's
Take
just
a wild
say
guess.
you had a book that came out recently.
I did. I had a book that came out just a couple weeks ago, and
Yes.
now I even have hard copies that you can hold up there for those of you
Betrayal
watching.
and Forgiveness, How to Navigate the Turmoil and Learn to Trust Again.
Yes, available in all of your favorite formats. Betrayal and Forgiveness. There are so many people that I work with. So many of you out there listening to this, I'm sure, have experienced betrayal. I mean, if you've lived long enough, you've probably been pretty badly hurt in some relationship, or some important relationship.
Yeah.
And this is a book that talks about lots of different kinds of betrayals. What I've been stressing in my social media posts recently is the couples. There's 12 couples in there. Not all romantic couples. There's a number of like married or romantic couples.
Right.
There's like a brother and sister that are dealing with issues of betrayal. There's a couple business partners.
Yeah, right, friends.
There's
parent
sibling.
child.
Right, exactly.
Parent
Parent-child, yeah.
Yeah.
So all sorts of different ways. And there's, of course, there are differences among them, but there's also a lot in common.
Yeah.
And I think I've got some pretty important stuff to say about that.
I think so too.
Yeah, well, thank you. I hope listeners, when you read the book, you will say so too. Of course, I'd be really interested in your feedback. Do get in touch and let us know. Where can you get that book? Well, anywhere books are sold. Early on especially, I am kind of pushing the Amazon approach, although if you really don't like Amazon, hey, I hear you. Get it at Barnes & Noble, just Google it. Or your other favorite bookstores, they can order it for you. But if you do it on the Amazon, more people find out about it that way. And the other thing, I appeal to folks, those of you, because I know there's quite a few actually of our listeners who've already bought the book. I know this from some feedback. I especially appeal to you to do a review on Amazon and Goodreads. If you're on Goodreads, reviews help people find out about the book, and so it will really help get the word out. So if you could do a review, obviously I'm hoping for a 5-star rating, but just say something that you saw in the book that was of interest to you.
Right.
That'll really help as well. Let's make mention of our other books. I think we should talk about your book.
Oh, okay. That would be The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible by Laria Zilber.
And tell people, who's Laria Zilber?
My alter ego.
Yes, indeed.
The one that writes erotica.
The one that writes erotica, and I've met her, and she's really cool. What can I say? In fact, I have something of a crush on her. I don't mean to tell you, but I do have a crush on Laria. What can I tell you?
She's crushworthy.
She's very crushworthy. And that is a beautiful book, I will say. And
so read that and review that too.
Yes, actually, read that and review that. And that is soon to be available in more places than it has been.
Right.
We're working
it was
on
only
getting that out.
available on Amazon and up till now, and now it is going on wide release.
It will be going on wide release
not quite yet.
Shortly, yeah. But in the meantime, make sure to search for The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible. Otherwise, you'll end up with, all sorts of nice blue tents you can buy, but that's not what you're looking for. The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible by Laria Zilber. More information at lariazilber.com. That's LARIAZYLBER, lariazilber.com. So,
And
want to mention mention my other books? Sure, they're still out there.
That's right. So we have Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back. And It's Not About Communication, Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy is Wrong.
Indeed.
So all of these fascinating books.
All of them, indeed. I was interviewed on our local CBS affiliate. You can find that, by the way, if you go to our
WCAX.com.
WCAX.com. You can go there, or you can just go to our website,
yeah, our website.
ctn7.com, and you'll find a link that will take you to a link about that. And if you watch that, I actually had occasion to mention one of the chapters in It's Not About Communication as part of promoting my book on betrayal and forgiveness, because I think the ideas about betrayal apply to wider than just relationships,
Yes.
than just couples.
Right.
The
Oh,
same
yeah,
ideas can be
absolutely.
applied to help heal this nation and heal the world. Not to be too grandiose about it, but there it
Well,
is.
if only everybody would follow it.
If only, indeed, yes.
Well, why don't we get on with our interview with Owen, and we'll see you on the other side. Our guest today is Owen Marcus. Owen is a coach and author known for integrating emotional physiology and attachment theory into men's emotional connection. His 30-year journey has led him to author a book, feature in a documentary, and start 3 businesses. Owen is a co-founder of MELD, which stands for Men's Emotional Leadership Development. MELD's approach combines somatic mindfulness and polyvagal theory to equip men with the tools they need to thrive in their personal and professional lives. Owen, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Thank you, Judy and Bruce. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's delightful to have you. So we always like to start off with our guests asking, tell us something about your own journey. How did you get into the work you do?
Sort of accidentally. It started back in the mid 70s. I ended up in Boulder, Colorado after college. Couldn't find a job in any of the ski areas in Colorado. Ended up in Boulder. Ended up living with a group of guys. One of them was from Florida, and he given up his law practice of 8 years to move to Boulder to be a Rolfer, and he argued his case so well. Well, oh, you need to get Rolf, which is a kind of a body therapy related
I got
to.
it once,
You've
by the
been
way.
Rolf.
I've been Rolf.
Oh, great, yeah, to align your body and get rid of chronic tension, and I really needed it. And after one session, I was like sold. Spent 4 years in Boulder learning Rolfing, studying with people like Ron Kurtz. I was in his first professional training. Peter Levine. We became mentors and friends. Hung out with these guys. Had them down, and then I moved to Phoenix after that. Had them down in Phoenix. Opened up a Rolfing practice, which became an integrated medical clinic in Scottsdale. Literally got burned out in Phoenix. Took a year off. Lived in Northern California. Moved to North Idaho. Downscaled my Rolfing practice, and soon after that started working with men. I started my first group when I had my clinic in Scottsdale because I didn't know how to connect, at least connect with women, and I realized I was a consistent variable. I needed some help, and maybe being in a men's group would help. I resisted that. I go, well, that's probably a sign I could probably use it. And one thing led to another. And 20 years ago, I said, men's groups are fine, but they're not really doing it for me. I'm going to change the model, created a new model, asked 11 guys to that group. They all said yes. And I said, oh, wow, I really got to do something. And then that group is still in existence today. It's a Sandpoint Men's Group. We've had over 400 guys go through this group. There's probably now 60 guys in the group. I'm in a Zoom group with the expats, some of the guys that moved away. And there's nothing I do with the group. It runs itself. So what I did, which is really what I'm doing with Meld, my current company, is I saw that men, most men, and I was one of them, if you ask me, what did I feel emotionally, I'd like look for the closest door out of the room. But if you ask me, what did I feel in my body, or particularly, how did I feel about stress, I start bragging about how much stress I had in my life and this and that. And I learned that when I had my Rolfing practice. So I just took it a little further and developed a whole system where we use the body or the somatic experience as a portal to get guys aware of their bodies, aware of their emotions, connected to themselves. And then from there, connected to the people they want to be connected to.
Wow. That's interesting. That notion that we as men don't have much language for emotional stuff, and women can talk rings around us usually when it comes to emotional stuff. And you can maybe tell me if this is true from your experience, because I'm not an expert in the physiology stuff. I read somewhere years ago that of course, men and women both have our main verbal centers in our left hemispheres. I read somewhere that women also have verbal centers in the right hemisphere. Is that, have you seen anything?
Well, I think the research about all those hemispheres are sort of dissolving away, and I think there's some truth, but they're finding that it's not as simple as
Yeah.
they originally had us believe.
Yeah, it's not all one or the other. I understand that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us, and it's something you said in some of your materials that we looked at, you had a personal journey that involved dyslexia and also involved Asperger's. And I'm curious, how did that influence you a lot?
Yeah, I didn't know I had dyslexia until I was in graduate school, and I was taking a speed reading course, and the guy saw I was trying, and he just saw I just wasn't doing it. And he said, "Are you dyslexic?" I go, "I don't think I am." He said, "Can you do the cross crawl, which is this ability to move cross laterally?" So I said, "Sure, I'll give it a try." I got on the ground, and I could not crawl where I could not move my right leg and my left arm at the same time.
Huh.
Really?
Wow.
And
Realized that was
so I
dyslexia.
dove into that, and I realized that that ability is a setup for your ability to read.
Huh.
And so I went on a big healing journey to heal dyslexia. So I've healed most of that. Uh, I still have some vestiges of it, but it doesn't really limit me in the ways it used to. And it's actually served me in many ways. And then, oh, probably 20 years ago, I realized I had Asperger's my whole life. And then I went on the journey to heal a lot of that, healed a lot of that, still have some of the vestiges, like my penmanship is terrible. But there's also some upsides of that, which I use. And a lot of that really, both of them actually helped me understand men. And then about 6 years ago, I realized I developed Lyme disease growing up in the East Coast when I was in high school
Really?
and did not know it until a few years ago.
Wow. Mm.
And that made a lot of sense because I always felt like looking back that I had chronic fatigue. I didn't have a lot of energy,
Mm.
but I was producing a lot, but it took me a lot to do it. And then I went on a basically intense 6 months of just really healing the Lyme, healed the Lyme, and then worked on healing the chronic fatigue. So at 71, I have more energy now than I probably had at 21.
Mm.
So you can actually get past Asperger's?
I think you can. I think you can get past a lot of it. You know, I'm certainly not an expert in one way, but in another way, I think I am because I've had it. So a lot of the experts haven't had it, and they sort of repeat a lot of what other people say, which is more the sort of academic approach to it. So academically or traditionally, we're told that you can't do much about it. It's just a matter of developing ways to compensate for it rather than ways to heal it. So
Yeah, it's interesting. What is that distinction? Because that's exactly what I've heard in terms of what you do. If somebody has that diagnosis, they've been evaluated and it says, okay, there are certain skills that come easily to some people that don't come easily to you. So the compensations are to learn some things consciously that most people don't have to be conscious of. You're talking about healing it, which sounds different. So yeah, what is that?
yeah, so when I thought I had it, I think I heard an NPR story and go, well, that sounds a lot like me. So I went to Google, researched it, went to Wikipedia. There was like a list of 12 things. I think I had 11 of them. I go, well, I probably have that. All right, now what am I going to do to heal it? And I've been healing some of it just from the course of everything I've done. Like Rolfing, I think, healed a lot of it because what I've seen with other people on the spectrum or with Asperger's is that we tend to be tighter than most.
Mm.
And with that, we tend to be
Physiologically.
disassociated.
Uh-huh.
And with that, to use Porges's or Levine's model, which I'm all for, we tend to be stuck in that freeze response
Mhm.
because I think we had an early trauma. And so knowing all that, I said, well, I can work with that. I can heal a lot of that. I know how to heal trauma. So as I healed the trauma in my body, my Asperger's got better.
Mm.
So that was one track. And another track is, with someone that has Asperger's, we traditionally don't have good social skills.
Mhm.
Right.
And I've always, we're told we're not aware. And I always thought that we were actually hyper aware. And now there's some new research coming out saying that, and that we're picking up a broader spectrum of channels and maybe more sensitive to those channels. So we're in overload.
Mhm.
But if we're more down-regulated and relaxed, and we can sort of distinguish what the channels are, we got more ways to process that. And as we can process it, we get more ways to relate.
Mm.
Can you talk to us about MELD, the whole process about how you go about the emotional development?
Yeah, so it's sort of like what I just described with Asperger's. I jokingly say that I think men, in a simple way, all have a little Asperger's.
Yeah, I
We
think
are
we have XY chromosome syndrome.
right. Yeah,
I just made that up on the
and I
spot.
had it to the to the extreme.
Yeah.
Uh,
I actually have mentioned often to folks, 'cause I think this is true. This is scraping the bottom of my memory from high school biology. But if I'm remembering correctly, the Y chromosome is actually just a defective X chromosome. It's the X chromosome with a bunch of it chopped off.
right.
So we have a defective second X chromosome.
Well, I don't want to call it a defective thing. I think
I appreciate that.
I think we do a lot of disservice to men, expecting men to be like women.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
it's not going to happen.
Well, and it's
Well,
also
and I did a TED talk about that, or TEDx talk, which essentially said that, just sort of indirectly answering your question, Judy, is that ever since we left the tribe 10,000 years ago, our culture's changed.
Hmm.
The farm was, a lot like a tribe, but 250 years ago, when we left the farm for the factory, it really changed because men were gone.
Mm.
So women had to step up, and they did. And they were like the sole parent. They were the teachers, the nurses, the caretakers, the therapists. So what's happened is we, as guys, we sort of picked up the feminine model of emotionality,
Mm.
which is not bad, but it doesn't completely fit us.
Right.
And what I found with doing men's groups and these men's trainings is you create a safe space for men, give them a few protocols like what happens here stays here, confidentiality, and maybe some real simple training. But pretty quickly, these guys will open up. And buried in our DNA or epigenetics or instinct, we know how to connect as men. We just first need to do it in an emotionally safe place with other men. And one of my stories is that, for years we're doing trainings where we'll have like 60 guys in a big barn, and we'll do like a check-in and go around the whole circle. And I might say, we're going to change the rules of what it is to be a man. And here, it's how much courage you have to be vulnerable. So a few guys check in and they don't say much. And one guy sort of sits up and reveals something that's vulnerable. And then he realizes, and everyone else realizes, unlike out there, he's not shamed for being weak or vulnerable. He's actually honored for it.
Yeah.
And then the guys get competitive.
Being guys.
I'm going to outdo Sam. I'm going to be more vulnerable. And by the end of the 60 guys, everyone's crying. And we all want that, but we don't have a space for it, and we don't have a model for it. And that's essentially what we do with MELD is we create spaces, we give them a model, and we've, over the years, in part through this somatic work, found a short course in learning how to connect and utilize those parts of ourselves.
Yeah, can you speak some more about the somatic work? Because that's interesting to me in the sense that what you're saying, your observation is that we as men are much more able to identify what's happening in our bodies than we are to say what's happening in our emotions. And of course, emotions are expressed through our bodies, but we usually don't have words for it. How do you work with men to help develop that skill?
There's several ways. I mean, one way is we often teach some somatic mindfulness. I used to have a mindfulness stress reduction company when I had the clinic. I was amazed at how well that would work with guys. But generally, if you're a new guy in our group or course, and I go, Bruce, what do you feel? And you sort of freeze, and you go, I don't feel anything. I don't know what I feel. And then I go, okay. And then I just start asking you about your body. I noticed that you moved your head. I noticed this. And so when you did that, what did you feel? And at first you might go, nothing. I go, okay. And but I'll keep asking questions. And eventually you go, oh yeah, I felt that move. Oh, I felt that get tense. And then, and I go, okay, great, great. All right, now what do you feel here? Within a minute or two of that, you're really feeling your body. 50% of the time you slip in an emotion. And if you don't, and then I go, okay, well, you raised your shoulder when you talked about your mother. What were you feeling when you raised your shoulder? And then he said, you'd say, yeah, I was feeling stress and sad and anxious. And you go, great. See, you're feeling emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I haven't heard too many guys actually, I'm disagreeing with myself as I say this. I have heard guys disagree with this, but I think as guys, we feel every bit as much as women do. We just don't know how to talk about it. We don't have, we don't have language for it, but it's not like we're less emotional. And I have had guys who would say, oh, I just don't feel emotions, but they don't
Clearly
feel
they
emotions. And yet clearly they do, in the sense that, at least
Yeah.
from the outside, you can see they're reacting in these intense ways to something, especially if it's like their wife saying it.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
but they just don't have consciousness of it.
So
Right.
how
You know that,
does Mel?
baby boys are more emotional than girls.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I was going to ask, how does Mel differ from other therapies, other therapeutic approaches?
Uh, yeah, we don't call it therapy, because we're not therapists. And our goal is to teach other men to teach men how to do this. And we've proven that we can do that.
Mhm.
Um, my focus with men and teaching men is, if you're two guys and I'm teaching you and from not so much our introductory course, but particularly when we do our 9-month certification where we train men and coaches and therapists, I say, look, your goal is not to give insights. Your goal is to take that man deeper into his experience and connect him to where he's disconnected. And often, at least initially, it's through his body. And a lot of it's just asking questions, and so you get a response. And we teach these guys how to read someone else's physiology and use that as a portal into a deeper awareness for that man. And then when they have like a nonverbal unconscious response that shows you, maybe not him yet, that there is a connection there, there's some emotion there, we'll pursue that. And we just keep taking the guy deeper, and sometimes quickly into amazing results where in a minute or two he might be sobbing because he's finally felt what he might have known but never felt.
Yeah.
So is this kind of like an Iron Man approach? Not that I know much about Iron Man other than men out in the desert and doing things.
You mean Burning Man?
Burning Man, thank
Ah.
you.
I was thinking, what?
Burning Man.
Burning Man. Got it. Yeah.
No. I've never been to Burning Man, but my partner, who's an EFT therapist, and we teach couples retreats and work together. She used to be on the med staff for Burning Man as a therapist. So I know she'd gone to like a dozen of them. She doesn't go anymore. So I know a lot about it being in California. And yeah, Burning Man is it's sort of like Mardi Gras and Halloween and a lot of other things combined. So ours is not like most
Like a space for men to be men type of thing.
places, but the old men's work is sort of running through the woods naked and banging a drum, and there's some of that kind of stuff still happening. And our approach is much more subtle, where it's normal guys just sitting in a group or sitting in a training or sitting virtually, learning how to connect to themselves and connecting to other guys. And one of the reasons I like that is that, yeah, these other kinds of more extreme approaches might get results, but they're state dependent.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they probably
But, talking is not state dependent. We do that all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, it's much more generalizable to other situations, which actually so would lead me to say, so what do you hear from women about the men who do this? And what do you hear from women in general?
They love it. They're our best referral.
Uh,
That and therapists.
yeah.
There was a joke, probably still is a joke. I'm not in my live groups anymore. that the best night for sex was the night of the men's group.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Because these guys would come home, relaxed, present, you might say in their power, but open.
Mm-hmm.
And, women and the guys would tell me it's like the guy would walk in the door and the woman's ripping his clothes off. And she's just like, this is what I've always wanted. And,
Yeah.
and often guys would go, because they're in a group or whatever with us, and they're talking, and some guy says, "Hey, Joe, it just doesn't seem right," or whatever. And he'll say, "Well, that's what my wife is telling me." But he listens to a guy when he doesn't listen to his wife.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's a
You see
phenomenon.
that all the time.
I
Hey,
agree.
right.
And of course, I have occasion, being, being a male therapist, right? I have many occasions actually, where I have mentioned to couples, especially to the guy in that situation, if you expect her to be grateful, I mean, on the one hand, yes, she might tear his clothes off. On the other hand, the experience of coming and observing that I've been telling you this for 20 years, and this total stranger, we show up in his office and he tells you basically the same thing. And now all of a sudden you're enlightened, and I often will say, she might be pissed. I usually don't have to say it. It's fairly obvious. And of course, the woman will often say that's there. And so is the other, that
Mhm.
both are true, that she's deeply grateful and deeply pissed because she then gets to feel some feelings she hasn't been able to express for a long time. And so it's a
Exactly.
dangerous
I mean, I
time.
said I had the same thing with my coaching clients, and they go, "I got it, I'm doing it." And then why is she pissed?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and because times of transformation tend to be the dangerous times. I mean, just dangerous in the sense of will the relationship hold? And because it's a time of stress. It's like, whoa, her processing that anger. And he has anger to process often too because of how pissed off she's been.
Mhm.
And so it's a dangerous time. And if people can get through that, they often can get over to the other side and be grateful. Then they can say, oh my God, this needed to happen. And look how much better off we are. But that's
Exactly, because as you're saying, you're taking the lid off of each person in the relationship.
yeah. I just wrote a book. I just released a book a couple of weeks ago on betrayal and forgiveness. It's all about
Mm.
that and that phenomenon of people. And I think I was guessing it's like well over half of the folks who show up in my office are dealing with some kind of betrayal, often infidelity. That's probably close to a third or more.
Mhm.
But in any case, they're dealing with betrayal and they're not ready for gratitude yet. But they're having to go to that place, which it sounds like, you're inviting men to in those groups. You're inviting men to actually experience what they're experiencing without shaming themselves, without shying away from it. But it's painful because it's painful stuff that often that they haven't had a chance to express.
Exactly, but it's easier to express it and have someone witness it and support it when they're with other men.
Yeah.
And then as you know, I mean, and then what happens, it activates or it stirs up something in another guy's emotion because he has a similar situation. And so there's this sort of collective support, which is not caretaking, but just all these men being vulnerable about similar experiences. And then because one of the classic things we hear in the beginning, I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And when a guy realizes he's not the only one, that's a big turning point.
Mhm.
Now, you have in-person groups, or is this on Zoom, or how does it work?
Both. I started out with in-person groups and sort of mastered that. And then we were going virtual, and then COVID happened. We went all virtual with my other company. And I was surprised how well that worked, and we're still doing that. And we do support live groups and, virtual trainings and live trainings. And so, yeah, in a hybrid of both. So we've sort of figured out, the best mix of all that. Because one of the things about virtual, it's just a lot easier for some guys.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, there's also sometimes people feel like I want to be in the room, but there's also something really interesting. I know during COVID when we would have, well, we're Jewish, so when we would attend like Shiva, on,
Mhm.
you really have to focus on the person who's talking and listen to each other, because you can't be in the room with them. So it gives an opportunity for people to, and everybody's looking at your face too, especially if you have the camera on, I should say. And I think most people would in this situation. But there is something an intimacy, I guess, on Zoom that is different than an intimacy in a room. It's very different, but it's also very interesting dynamic that happens. Do you find that when you?
Yeah, like I said, I'm in a Zoom group I met last night, and there are guys from all over the country. Even though it's sort of West Coast guys because we started out in Sandpoint, which is the West Coast time zone, but we had guys in the East Coast that stay out 3 hours later just to be in this group. One's a surgeon in Ohio. Um, yeah, and guys go deep, and it's like you learn that one guy at a time speaks, and uh, yeah, it could be really powerful. And I would say it's a good 80% as effective as live, sometimes maybe more.
Yeah. Yeah, it is different. I noticed that when I switched over, and I do all virtual now with my couples since the pandemic. I switched over, and the convenience factor is just amazing for everyone. Among other things, it's easier to schedule because they don't have to be in the same place. They can be at two different work sites or whatever and schedule an appointment. But it is interesting. It's not only, one talks at a time, and also you're seeing everybody all at the same time, and you can look at anybody you want to, and it doesn't have the same effect as looking someone in the eye, which is a downside,
Hmm.
but it's also an upside. It's sort of like, well, everybody's sort of aware of that part. So I get to see both people in the couple and see how they're reacting and in ways that are different from when I'm in the room with them. It's sort of interesting where you're sort of looking at one or the other and,
Right, and you might
yeah.
be able to pick up different clues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not like I'm not being deceptive at all. I mean, it's
No.
they can see you're not see, but
Mhm.
everybody has a different sense of that experience of someone.
Mhm.
So absolutely the downside, you don't get all the body language, but you do
Right.
get a lot of stuff that you don't get when you're in person.
But I imagine also, I mean, if you got a couple and they're in different rooms or spaces, you get a different dynamic versus if they're together in the same room and you're there with them, good and bad.
Yes.
And so, yeah, again, Dahlia, my partner, who's Israeli, I mean, she just came back from Israel. We talk about all that because she does both now, the virtual and the live, and yeah, how she has clients all over the country,
Mm.
all over the world, actually. I mean, some in Israel.
Uh-huh.
As a therapist?
Yeah, as a therapist.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's interesting. You were distinguishing between what you're doing and therapy. And I'm a therapist, right? I'm a licensed therapist. And yet when I hear what you're talking about, it sounds like really good therapy, which is to say, I know you're not allowed to say you're a therapist because of the licensing issues, which when I look at, and I have to think about it because I'm saying, well, I'm only licensed in 2 states. If I want to see people not in those states, I
Right,
would have to call it coaching.
right.
There is, in fact, no difference. I don't mind going on the record saying that. I mean, there's a huge range of different ways of doing therapy and a huge range of different ways of doing coaching, and it's covering exactly the same territory. I can't see any distinction.
Well,
People,
and it's
but
therapeutic.
yeah, yeah, and it's therapeutic, and you can find websites that will purport to distinguish between them because again, they have to cover themselves for the licensing issues. But when they do that, they say stuff that is just silly. It's just patently not true. They'll talk about how, well, coaches don't do certain things about, inviting certain kinds of insights or asking about the past. Yes, you do.
Yeah,
Of course it comes up. And therapists, on the other hand, don't give advice. Well, I try to avoid giving advice and telling people what to do anyway, but I think
do.
good therapists tend to do that too. So, it's really, I understand the need for licensing laws, but it's really kind of a mess.
Yeah, and so I agree with you in the distinction. I go, look, I don't diagnose.
I don't either. I will tell you, the only reason I did is when I used to accept insurance.
Right, you had to with insurance.
Yes. And even then, I would try and find the least stigmatizing diagnosis, typically adjustment disorder not otherwise specified. Everybody I work with had adjustment disorder, which is to say, shit's happening. It's the shit's happening diagnosis, and they need some help with it, which is why everybody goes to therapy one way or another.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm not the one to go to if you need a definitive diagnosis of bipolar, for example. That requires medical expertise. And yes, that's good. You should go to somebody who can prescribe you the appropriate medication, which I can't do anyway. So yeah, even that distinction, I don't think always holds up. Yeah, it holds up in the sense that if you can't accept insurance, you don't have to do a diagnosis. So that's a benefit, not a
That's
not a
right.
limitation.
Well, when I had my Rolfing practice and clinic, I abhorred working with insurance. I'd avoid it. It was all cash because it was such a pain.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I finally got away from it. I used to do it more as a matter of feeling like, well, I didn't want to only be available to people who could afford it. So I did want to make myself available to, I accepted pretty much any insurance for a long time, but I finally got into my 70s and felt I had paid my dues and
Right.
let the younger folks do that.
Right.
And so I got rid of that part of it, and it's been wonderful ever since, I have to say. About a year ago that I did that, and it's just been delightful to not have to think about insurance companies.
Oh, yeah.
What else should we be asking you about?
That's a good question. I can go on for
What have we
hours.
done?
What have we not covered?
What have we not
that
covered? Yeah.
We should know in your practice.
it- well, let me just sort of back up a little and give you like the four pillars, and you can see if that opens something up. So what I realized in doing all this and working with men and being effective, there was a couple, there was a few things that we needed to focus on. One was the body, getting guys aware of the body and, connected to it and using that as a portal and teaching them how to use their body, not just to connect to their emotions, but how to downregulate their nervous system or their stress response. And guys relate to that because, like I said before, we're sort of proud of how much stress we have until, they start to realize it's really hurting them. And giving them some simple tools to help teach down regulation. And that sort of gets into the whole co-regulation and, what Stephen Porges talks about, which is right on for what I've noticed is that when we can get these guys to start to connect to their own experience, they're able to connect to someone else, and then they start to co-regulate, or they start to develop that sort of secure attachment where that connection starts to relax both people.
Mhm.
And that's one of the secrets of what we do. We have the sort of what I call emotional physiology, the Stephen Porges polyvagal theory applied model, and then we also have the sort of the application of the attachment theory model, which is this co-regulation and teaching guys how to do that first with other guys, because it's really safe. Because, I could be in a room with a dozen guys, all different ages, maybe sexual orientations, professions, all that, but we're all guys. And we pretty quickly start to connect and it's safe. And so I learn, and my nervous system learns how to do that. And then, as you said, it starts to generalize in other relationships. And so I go back into my primary relationship and I start feeling in my body and I go, oh, I'm starting to get stressed or upregulated. Oh, I know what to do. And one of the simple things we teach guys is what I call this ROC formula, ROC. R is we slow down to relax, because everyone's told us to relax, but no one told us how to do it. So we teach guys how to slow down or literally slow down their nervous system or their body and relax. And then the O is to open up for vulnerability, just the vulnerability of their own experience, but being vulnerable to someone else's experience, empathetic, being in a safe place so they can have their experience. And then maybe the risky part, as you're relaxed, as you're open and vulnerable, you reach out for connection.
Mhm.
And it might fail, but you reach out, and if it fails, you get stressed, you go back to relaxing. And that simple little model ends up really helping guys. It gives them something to do at work and at home when they want to, change their relationships. And then the other thing that we work with is really the science of a lot of this. Guys like, okay, show me the science. So we're able to show them the science.
Mhm.
And what we're trying to do is, take these guys deeper, as I said, and really address the cause of their issues. And my approach is that, we've all had stress and trauma to some extent. And when we, as we know, when we can't process that experience in the moment, we end up with some version of PTSD, which is a version of that freeze response. So it locks into our body. And as Hans Selye, the guy who wrote the book on stress, said, fascia is the organ of stress, which is what the Rolfers work on, which is why it made such a difference for me. When that system in the body starts to release, we become a lot more resilient, stress-wise, and more aware. And guys start to develop that, and they're a lot more available for connection with other people, and consequently, they're just creating more emotionally safe spaces for people. Because like one of our clients has been Google, and Google had us come in and develop programs for them because we were working with the scientists at Google X and how to, foster a connection so they could cooperate more and support each other. Not that they weren't, but because of that high stress situation, they weren't performing in a way that they wanted to, Google wanted them to, but they, these scientists weren't
Yeah,
doing that because they didn't know how to downregulate and connect.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I said all those guys with Asperger's.
Exactly. I felt like I was at home there.
I'm home. Right.
Yes, indeed. So how can people get in touch with you?
They can go to our site, meld.community, which
I
is,
haven't seen that before, that .community thing.
yeah, that's new. Well, because all the .coms are taken and the
Yeah.
other ones. So, or you can spend $20,000 on buying one. But so we went, .community, because really this is a community. And men can join our community. It's free. So it's MELD.community. And there's a website. There's a lot on the website. And we have several programs, but the program that we recommend guys to start with is what we call the core program. And that's started with something I developed before I ever developed Everyman, which was a previous company. And it's a really dialed in course that takes a guy right off the street, teaches them some of these skills for themselves, but they learn it again in this sort of peer-to-peer setup with other guys, which really reinforces it. And then they can go on and do other things from that course.
Great. Well, we will make sure to put that in the episode notes. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate it. And then let's hope the weather cools off in Vermont.
Yes, thank you.
That's
For those listeners who didn't hear what we were talking about before, it happens to be unusually hot today in Vermont. We're recording this on, what is it, June 20th, 2024.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Heat wave.
We are going through a heat wave. Yes, thank you.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed that interview with Owen. He was certainly very interesting, and I really like his approach to working with men's emotional development.
Absolutely, yes. So if you have interest in that, you can find information. I'll put that on the notes for this episode, how to get in touch with Owen. So just a brief word, just in general, hey, buy our books.
Buy our books.
You can find information about all of that. If you go to ctn7.com, that's where the repository of all information.
And if you're enjoying this podcast, follow us, share us, tell your friends, like us, post on social media. Anytime somebody asks you for a recommendation, hey, what's a good podcast I can listen to? Hey, couples therapy in 7 words.
Absolutely.
There you go.
And so until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.